But let's go back to 2023. Now, let's go, in fact, around this time last year, February 7, you said this about the Richmond premiership captain, Trent Cotchin.
Is Trent Cotchin in Richmond's best 22? If he's not in the centre bounce, in the phone box where he does his best work, and you know what I mean by that, when he's diving on boots, when he's tackling, when he's winning clearance, when he's pushing the ball forward, I don't think if he's not playing that role, he's in Richmond's best 22. He's kicked 16 goals in the last 5 seasons, Trent Cotchin.
Now, he was touted as a forward, some even having a bit of a laugh. Trent Coleman was the running gag. He kicked 7 goals, 8. But he did play the 19 games, but that's by virtue of his stature in that side, of course, as a leader and an on-field presence.
Probably not a definitive answer to that one.
But not wrong.
Not wrong, but no, maybe not right. He was
not
probably,
wrong at all.
to be fair.
But he wasn't a forward. You never had him as a forward.
He was definitely not a forward. He played his best football as a midfielder. So when he was playing, it was probably more on the right side than the wrong side.
Now, the Saints, I reckon it's fair to say the Saints proved a lot of people wrong in 2023. That is for sure. They took some scalps. 20 days on from your Trent Cotchin comment, you said this about the Saints.
St Kilda coach Ross Lyon has quickly been reminded of how difficult this coaching business is. From what we witnessed on the weekend, they are no chance to match the 11 wins achieved last season.
So they did.
Wrong.
And they played finals.
Couple of lessons in that one.
They won 13 games.
Yeah, that was straight after I don't know if it was their first or second preseason game. They got smacked, and it was a horrible game of football, and they looked awful. And that was the Monday after that preseason game. So there's a few lessons not to get caught up in. We do it every year, and I'll do it again this year, no doubt. Don't get caught up in preseason form, but yeah.
I fell into it big time with the Cats, who we're going to get to in a moment, in their preseason game down the highway against Hawthorn, where, geez, they just looked amazing. Coming off a premiership was like, by how far? Like, they were that good in a preseason game. And so despite all our warnings and all the things we know about preseason games, we dipped into it, didn't we? And just on preseason games, the Western Bulldogs turned out a ripper as well at Icon Park. It might have been against North Melbourne, a revolutionary setup of tall timber. You said this about your Western Bulldogs on March the 6th, Kano.
The Dinosaur Dogs was the biggest winner of the weekend for me. And when I say that, the scepticism and we spoke about it last week and asked you the question, could they possibly wheel out the 4 tools in this forward line? It's like nothing we've ever seen, I think. But it just seemed to work on the weekend. Now, granted, it was against North Melbourne. The opposition weren't that strong, but the chemistry and synergy they had and the positioning of the forwards worked.
So the Dino Dogs were going to take 800 contested marks a game and turn the competition on their head.
I didn't say that. I liked what I saw from the Dinosaur Dogs. Now, it lasted probably 2 weeks. I think they lost their first 2 of the season last year.
Oh, no. It turned all right.
Sam Darcy got injured. So for those that say I never say something positive about the Western Bulldogs, you just heard it.
We had to search hard for that, really hard.
But the Dino Dogs didn't work, and I don't think we'll see them go back to that.
Are you proud of yourself?
That was much the 6th. Boy, you said things changed. Did they change in your little home office? Because this is where you got to by mid-July.
At the end of the year, I would be having serious conversations about moving on from Luke Beveridge as coach. I would.
So that a revolutionary setup that's going to propel the Dogs deep.
They're two separate issues. They're two. I thought that.
Well, no, they're not.
They are.
They're not, because the coach chooses the 4 tall
But he
setup.
hasn't been able to max. I don't want to go over old ground with Luke, and that one's still up in the air. And a lot of these are still debatable. And we'd love your thoughts. 1300 736 736. I believe it was the right time to move on from Luke Beveridge at the end of last year, and I wouldn't have extended him. So I still stand by that. Now, I may be wrong on that. We may be sitting here this time next year and the Western Bulldogs have gone top 4 and made a prelim final or got close to winning a premiership. That could easily happen. So that one, and the jury is still out on that. And there's a lot of Bulldogs fans that think it's the right move to stick with the premiership winning coach, Luke Beveridge. There's some that think, I agree with Kane, and it was time to move on for a fresh start. And we'll wait and see, as we spoke yesterday about the findings of that review.
But on the umpiring,
yes,
which was a talking point right throughout the year, the standard of it. We went to 4 umpires last year for the first time, of course. And the new setup, well, you said this back in mid-Feb.
The introduction of 4 umpires will be chaotic. The competition doesn't have enough depth to fill the extra umpiring positions.
And unfortunately, umpires feel compelled to influence games and can't help but blow their whistles. More umpires will mean more unnecessary free kicks.
So the umpiring standard was it because we went to 4 or could it just have been poor anyway?
It didn't help. Like four umpires didn't help the standard of umpiring. And I completely stand by the fact we don't have enough depth or enough talent of umpiring. That's why we still have umpires that are in their mid-40s. We need younger ones coming through, and I know the AFL are onto this and the junior pathways are, but 4 umpires, maybe the umpires liked it because they didn't physically have to do as much work, but in terms of improving the standard and the game, it did little to do that.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that goes next year. The Coleman medal was won by Charlie Curnow at the Blues. Didn't have the final series he was hoping for, Charlie, but he was an absolute powerhouse in the home and away. But you had another man you predicted was going to win the Coleman back in March.
If Adelaide have a good year, Darcy Fogarty can win the Coleman. That was bold.
They had a good year.
Yeah, they did. It was. I knew at the time that was a bold one. And that
Oh,
was
you
like,
knew
you know what you see in the preseason, bold preseason opinions or takes. That was one of those. So
I'm just scrolling down. I'm
34.
trying to remind me.
He kicked
34. So where did that have him? Like
no,
sort
way
of
off.
30th?
Way off, but I still think there is untapped potential for Darcy Fogarty. Now he's on the right track. A few years ago, I was worried about where his career was going. He got dropped. They were trying to play him as a defender. They tried to play him as a midfielder. It didn't work, but he's got so much fitter, and he's now definitely a first-choice player in the Adelaide side, which is a big tick. I think he's capable of 50. Maybe it's not Coleman medal-winning All-Australian potential, but I think he's got 50-plus in him.
Kane, not often you remember pre-season games, but we both remember Geelong showing down the highway against Hawthorn. It might have even been their very first sort of showing of season 2023 coming off the premiership. They were magnificent against Hawthorn, who couldn't lay a hand on them. It was incredible. And you said this about the Cats, Feb 2023.
Things would have to go badly off track for Geelong not to win back-to-back premierships.
So they'd have to go badly off track. And then just no, hang on.
I went further than that though. I said everyone was playing for second.
You said things would have to go badly off track for them not to win again, but this was you come April.
Jeremy Cameron can probably get away with that, but if his teammates have also celebrated like that, I'll ask you the question: Can Zach Tui get away with living off beer fumes and hash browns for breakfast? Can Tom Atkins do the same? Because he's not the same player that was jumping on landmines for his teammates in the last 10 games of last year. This is a group that's satisfied.
6 weeks later, they've over-celebrated.
Well, information changes, Sammy. Information came across my desk that has changed that opinion. Now, if they were that hungry group that we saw for the last 16 weeks of 2022, and if they were jumping on landmines, they would have been really difficult to beat. But clearly, and this is the hardest thing, we'll wait and see what happens with Collingwood. Satisfaction is one of the great dangers to ruin your season. It's so even. If you get satisfied, if you over-celebrate, if you're like Jeremy Cameron, you live off McDonald's for the whole of the off-season and his teammates did the same and you come back comfortable, then you won't go back-to-back. And that's definitely what happened. There were some other factors, of course, but yeah, I think they were a group that was satisfied. Would you agree, the Cats?
It was
to an extent.
Yeah, to an extent. Did that mean that their season spiralled out of control? No.
Well, there were other factors. I didn't say it spiralled out of control, but
they didn't play finals after winning the premiership.
It was a factor in why
they never they never got going, did they? And there are other factors at play. And maybe it's impossible to measure, isn't it? It's an intangible. You're all over the Tigers though, and the end of what was a glorious era for them. You said this just in and around their Swans matchup gather round April 16.
To me, it feels like the end of an era tonight. I know that's a big statement off one game, but I think it's more than that. I was really perplexed by the moves that they made in the off-season. It was a significant risk, and a risk that I think is really going to damage the future of the football club. It's not going to be Damien Hartlett's problem because the likelihood of him being there for over 20 years is unlikely when these Hopper and Taranto deals expire.
Well, as it was, he only had a couple of months left, but you were spot on there with the Tigers.
That's the thing with coaches having significant power over list management decisions, and some would, and we've had this discussion on air before. Some would say, well, how influential was Damien Hardwick in the trade decisions that they've made? I would think he was significantly influential in that, and then he's gone 9 weeks in. So just be really careful about coaches who are ultra competitive, who want to stay up the top, who don't want to rebuild and want to keep winning, having say over what list management decisions you made. But I mean, it was a fantastic era, wasn't it? And as we discussed yesterday, I think the Richmond fans are sitting there pretty comfortable knowing that they were able to live through what was an extraordinary era. But yeah, I mean, it was ugly last year, and I think it's going to be ugly for probably half a decade at Tigerland.
We're holding you two things this morning. And look, to be honest, you weren't on your own with your thoughts on Brisbane's forward setup and how it had them fit for September and fit for the ultimate success. And I'll refer to their two keys, Danaher and Hipwood. You said this is early. This was just in the shadows of March 31, in fact.
They can't win the premiership with Danaher and Hipwood.
Now, they didn't win the premiership, but Danaher kicked 60+ and was one of the best sides on grand final day. Hipwood, I think, third for goals for Brisbane, second for goal assists. They weren't the reason they didn't win the premiership.
Can I give you Hipwood's final series?
Oh, here we go.
Can I give you Eric Hipwood's final series?
I know what.
Against
I know
Port
what
Adelaide in a big win at home, 1 goal, 3.
I thought you'd fall on your sword with this one.
In a prelim final against the Blues, 11 touches and a goal. And in the grand final, we didn't see him. We did not see Eric Hipwood in the grand final. Now, it is really tough to say that it was Eric Hipwood's fault that Brisbane didn't win the premiership. But that one, and Danaher really impressed me. And I was in the All-Australian meeting, when we discussed him at length. I thought he was enormous. And there's definitely, his reputation has grown significantly. Yeah. But the jury is out whether Eric Hipwood is a viable second option. I reckon Brisbane may be better without him and go something a little bit more unique because they have the most talented small forward group, medium smalls as well as genuine smalls.
But they're shining, and you could mount an argument, could you not, that the reason they're shining is because of the two keys?
Perhaps, and they would say, and I've debated this with Chris Fagan, he would say, well, you don't see what Eric does off the ball and how strong he is defensively and all of the other stuff that he does to make everyone around him better. I would argue you're a forward, you're there to make a contest. Far too often he is inconsistent, and I would like, even though they've signed him for a ridiculous 7-year deal, which was a really strange one at the time, for them to explore just going a little bit smaller in their forward line with the amount of talent that they've got. And that may be something, not they'll do every week, but something that they could go to at times this year.
Yeah. Hold me to it here from a big Saints fan, a Saints double. In fact, Paddy Dow will be the recruit trade of the year, and Wanganeen Miller will make the All-Australian squad. That's coming through from 206.
Don't mind the Paddy Dow one. Like he could be like a Blake Acres style value for money. Give up nothing to get him. And he may play a significant role for them this year, so I don't mind it.
Jake Stringer, we've got a text here, Kano. It's a question without notice, which we'll address later. But Jake Stringer had a contract at the end of this season. Will Essendon extend that before the end of the season? You had some thoughts on him and his fitness last February.
I was taken aback when photos emerged of Stringer presenting for day one of that pre-season. And by elite athlete standards, he was overweight again. And now he's injured. Until Stringer achieves strict fitness and body measurement goals, Scott should not pick him in the senior team.
So that was Jake Stringer. Didn't have the season that he or Essendon would have wanted.
Well, they essentially said that. I mean, they had a crack at picking him when he wasn't ready, but I think at stages last year they said, well, he's got to go back and he's got to get himself into a condition that he is able to perform the role that we need. And there'll be a few other players that go through that this pre-season that don't present the way that they should, and that will affect their years like it has for Jake, not just for last year, but I think for the majority of his career. And to the question, should they extend him? Absolutely not. You're not going to extend Jake Stringer now. You're going to wait and see how it all goes, and then I would think it would be 1-year deals for the rest of his career, unfortunately, for him with the stage that he's at.
Yep, and maybe that's what he needs to keep that motivation going. Tim Taranto, this might shock some people, but you had some comments to make around Tim's status in the game last year. The words Tim Taranto 150, I don't think I've ever seen more often in the same sentence, but you had this to say about his skills back in April.
Tim Taranto is the worst kick in the AFL.
The worst kick in the AFL?
Short and sharp. Maybe he's not the worst kick in the AFL, but he'd be one of the worst from a player that gets as much of the footy as him. And yeah, obviously we discussed him at length last year.
At length,
Yes.
we did indeed. Now, hold me to it. I mean, we said we were going to get into it tomorrow, forecasting well, but you've already started. In true Kane Cornes fashion, you've already made a big prediction about this upcoming season. In fact, you made it way back in September. The season was still going, effectively. And you had this to say about Sydney's prospects without their co-captain, Callum Mills.
But what I've read, it's nasty, and whether he's right for round one remains to be seen.
I heard it's up to 12 months.
Yeah, well, they can't win the premiership without him. So he is the defensive Josh Dunkley that Brisbane have. Brisbane aren't in a grand final if it's not for Josh Dunkley. Sydney will be the same if it's not for Callum Mills.
Dangerous territory here,
Well,
Kane.
I don't know. I think
Dangerous.
I think he's that important with the youth of their midfield and the role that he plays in and amongst that midfield. I think it would be difficult for them.
No, you said they can't.
Yeah, well, I don't think they can. I mean, they're hard to win. Premierships are hard to win. You've got to have everything going right for you. And without Callum Mills and his leadership and the role that he plays, whew,
Good trade period for Sydney, though, wasn't it? A few reinforcements have arrived.
they'll be around the place.
Kids will get better.
They'll be a very great club, well coached. Some big losses, though. Don Pike's a big loss.
Is that, do you reckon, the earliest can't win a premiership we've ever seen? September of the year before?
I did preface it by saying if he's not playing. Now, I got no idea. How serious is it? I've heard.
I don't know how his recovery's going, but it is a serious, serious injury.
So
There's
if
a
he
large chunk, if not most of the season.
doesn't play this year, yeah, I'll stand by that.
Okay, you'll stand by it. I expect nothing less.